marriage is complex, and when things go wrong in a marriage, they rarely happen overnight. One of the most difficult situations many couples face is when a husband decides to leave his wife for another woman. While it is a painful and emotional experience, understanding the reasons behind such actions can provide clarity and even a path toward healing or closure. In this video, we will explore reasons why husbands may leave their wives for another woman. Each part will include specific examples, realistic scenarios, and practical insights. This journey is not about assigning blame, but about shedding light on common issues that could make or break a relationship. Whether you're facing this situation, working to strengthen your marriage, or simply curious, this exploration could provide valuable lessons. 1. Emotional neglect. A marriage thrives on emotional connection and understanding. When a husband feels emotionally neglected, he may begin to feel unimportant, lonely, or unheard. Over time, this neglect creates an emotional void, which can leave the husband vulnerable to forming attachments outside the marriage. Emotional neglect doesn't necessarily mean outright rejection. Sometimes it's unintentional, resulting from busy schedules, stress, or misunderstandings about emotional needs. Example: David had always been a supportive husband, helping his wife Laura during her stressful times. As years went by, Laura's focus shifted heavily toward their children and her demanding job. David understood the pressures she was under. He started to feel like his emotions didn't matter. On many occasions, he tried to share his concerns about feeling overlooked, but Laura would respond dismissively, saying, "I've had a harder day than you." At work, David met Alice, a co-worker who always took time to ask how he was feeling and genuinely listened. Her empathy filled the emotional gap left in his marriage. David didn't intend to develop feelings for Alice, but the emotional connection became hard to ignore. Eventually, he felt drawn to her, leaving Laura wondering what went wrong. 2. Lack of physical intimacy. Physical intimacy is more than just a sexual act. It's a crucial way couples show love, vulnerability, and connection. When this aspect is missing, one or both partners may feel unattractive, undesired, or disconnected. Without open communication about the lack of intimacy, resentment can grow, pushing one partner to seek validation and closeness elsewhere. Example: Sarah and Mike started their relationship with a strong physical connection, but as their responsibilities grew, their intimacy declined. Sarah, juggling work and their new baby, often felt too exhausted to be affectionate, and she expected Mike to understand. While Mike supported Sarah as much as he could, he began feeling rejected whenever his advances were turned down. Over time, he stopped trying, which made the distance between them even worse. At a business conference, Mike met someone who admired him and made him feel desired again. She complimented his appearance, laughed at his jokes, and showed interest in him in ways Sarah hadn't in years. Despite knowing his marriage mattered, Mike found himself gravitating toward this new relationship for the physical and emotional validation he craved. 3. Unresolved conflicts. Every couple has disagreements, but when conflicts go unresolved, they create barriers to communication and intimacy. Recurring arguments without resolution can cause a partner to feel they're constantly misunderstood or disrespected. When this builds over time, it may lead one to seek peace, comfort, or validation outside the marriage. Example: Emily and John argued frequently about finances, particularly John's spending habits. Emily wanted to save for their children's future, but John believed they should enjoy life and take occasional vacations. Instead of finding a compromise, their arguments turned into blame games. Over time, John avoided discussing finances altogether, opting to confide in a friend at work. This friend, Lisa, provided a sympathetic ear and encouraged him to live his life. Their connection deepened as John began seeing Lisa as someone who understood him in a way Emily no longer did. 4. Feeling underappreciated is the cornerstone of many happy relationships. When a husband feels his efforts go unnoticed, he may feel invisible and unvalued despite all he does. Small gestures like thank you notes, compliments, or acknowledging contributions can make a big difference in how appreciated a spouse feels. Without this validation, resentment can fester. Example: Matthew worked tirelessly to provide for his family. Beyond his 9-to-5 job, he handled grocery shopping, helped with homework, and managed household repairs. Despite all his efforts, his wife Anna rarely expressed gratitude. When Matthew brought up his feelings, Anna dismissed him, saying, "Why should I thank you for doing things you're supposed to do?" At his weekend gym sessions, a woman frequently praised Matthew's work ethic and generosity. This praise contrasted starkly with the lack of acknowledgement he felt at home. Over time, her validation made Matthew feel special in a way he hadn't in years, pushing him toward a connection outside his marriage. Note: emotional neglect and a lack of communication often lay the foundation for bigger issues in marriages. Physical and emotional intimacy are interconnected. Neglecting one often impacts the other. Appreciation doesn't have to be grand, it just needs to be consistent. Understanding these dynamics can help couples recognize early warning signs and work towards solutions before issues escalate. 5. Excitement of a new relationship. The thrill of a new relationship can be intoxicating, especially when a marriage feels predictable or monotonous. Over time, many long-term relationships fall into routines that can dampen excitement and spontaneity. The new relationship offers the adrenaline rush of something fresh, different, and forbidden, which can sometimes overshadow the deep connection that already exists in a marriage. Step example: she didn't know Tom's history, his flaws, or the mundane parts of his life. She only saw the version of him he wanted to project. Their flirtatious conversations and stolen glances gave him a rush he hadn't felt in years. As the relationship grew, Tom began romanticizing Rachel and started to view his marriage as something that held him back, rather than something worth fighting for. 6. Loss of compatibility. People evolve over time, and so do their interests, values, and goals. When couples grow in different directions without making efforts to bridge the gap, it can create a sense of incompatibility. A husband may feel he no longer shares common ground with his wife, leaving him susceptible to bonding with someone who aligns better with his current self. Example: Lily and Ryan's relationship initially flourished because of their shared love for travel and outdoor adventures. However, after the birth of their second child, Lily became more focused on stability and family life, while Ryan continued craving adventure and spontaneity. Ryan began feeling restless and unfulfilled in their marriage. One day, he joined a local hiking group where he met Dana, someone who loved exploring as much as he did. The time he spent with Dana reignited his passion for adventure and left him feeling understood and alive. Over time, Ryan began seeing Lily as someone who no longer got him, and he chose to leave her, believing he was better suited for someone like Dana. 7. Financial independence. Financial roles in a marriage can affect the dynamics of power, respect, and even attraction. When a husband feels financially inadequate or unappreciated, it can hurt his financial independence and make him seek validation elsewhere. Likewise, if a wife's financial independence shifts the balance of the relationship in ways that lead to resentment or distance, it can cause a strain in the marriage. Mark and Olivia's marriage dynamic changed when Olivia's business became highly successful and Mark decided to take on the role of a stay-at-home dad. While they both initially agreed to this arrangement, Olivia's comments about being the breadwinner slowly chipped away at Mark's confidence. Despite his contributions to the household, Mark felt emasculated and undervalued. Over time, his conversations with Olivia became strained, and he often felt like he was failing her. At a community event, Mark met Jen, a single mother who praised his nurturing abilities and constantly told him how amazing he was. Her validation gave Mark a sense of pride he hadn't felt in years, and this connection eventually pulled him away from Olivia. 8. Influence of toxic relationships. Sometimes, external influences, such as friends, co-workers, or ex-partners, can cause significant harm to a marriage. This doesn't absolve the husband of responsibility, But toxic relationships outside the marriage can cloud judgment and lead to impulsive decisions. Example: Andrew and Megan had a relatively happy marriage, although they occasionally argued about priorities and time spent together. Things began to change when Andrew reconnected with his ex-girlfriend Claire at a mutual friend's wedding. Claire frequently texted and called Andrew, reminiscing about their past and questioning whether he was truly happy in his marriage. Claire's persistent attention and emotional manipulation created doubt in Andrew's mind about his relationship with Megan. Over time, he started confiding in Claire instead of Megan, and he grew distant from his wife. Eventually, Andrew left Megan for Claire, only to later realize he had been influenced by Claire's toxic behavior. Key takeaways from those points are: the spark and excitement of new relationships can make existing relationships feel less fulfilling, but this is often rooted in a lack of attention to the marriage itself. Compatibility evolves over time and requires couples to consciously nurture shared interests and goals. Financial dynamics can affect both partners' emotional well-being and sense of worth, which needs open communication to maintain balance. Sign: gilding. Toxic external relationships can exploit cracks in a marriage and widen them if not addressed early. Understanding these dynamics can help couples reignite their connections, identify warning signs, and strengthen their bonds. 9. Midlife crisis. A midlife crisis can be a turning point for many individuals, both men and women, where they begin questioning their life choices, accomplishments, and their very purpose. For some husbands, this introspection and reevaluation of life priorities may manifest as a desire to break free from perceived constraints, including their marriage. This period of emotional turmoil can lead to seeking younger, more vibrant partners or other forms of validation that they feel they have missed out on. Example: Paul had always been the stable, reliable type, a successful career, a loving wife, and 2 kids. Everything seemed perfect on the outside, but as he hit his 45th birthday, he found himself staring at the road ahead and feeling dissatisfied. What's the matter? He began to question if he had truly achieved all he wanted in life. He started acting impulsively, purchasing a flashy car and getting more involved in social activities outside of his family life. During this time, Paul began a flirtation with Samantha, a younger colleague who was drawn to his confidence and success. Her admiration made Paul feel invigorated and reminded him of a younger version of himself, the one he thought he had lost. His marriage with Lisa, though stable, no longer seemed to provide the excitement and recognition he craved. Eventually, Paul left Lisa for Samantha, thinking that this new relationship would give him the thrill and purpose he thought had disappeared from his life. Second date. Unrealistic expectations. Many people, especially in modern times, are constantly bombarded with idealized portrayals of love and relationships in movies, TV shows, and social media. This can create unrealistic expectations of what a perfect marriage should be. When a husband's expectations aren't met, whether regarding romance, communication, or mutual happiness, he might start to view his marriage as falling short. This disillusionment can lead him to fantasize about relationships that seem more fulfilling or less challenging. Example: Liam and Emma had been married for 8 years. Throughout their early years, their relationship was passionate, but as time went on, the challenges of work, parenting, and financial stress began to wear on them. Liam began comparing his relationship to those portrayed on social media, where couples seemed to have it all together. Happy dates, adventure-filled vacations, and perfect intimacy. In perfect living conditions, their financial stress and was deprivation. Liam began to expect that level of excitement and attention from Emma, but she, overwhelmed by daily responsibilities, didn't have the time or energy to meet those idealized expectations. Instead of communicating his needs clearly, Liam grew increasingly frustrated, thinking that their relationship wasn't special anymore. When he met Mia through a mutual friend, her carefree attitude, spontaneous nature, and constant eagerness for romantic adventures seemed like the breath of fresh air he'd been craving. It wasn't long before Liam convinced himself that Mia represented the kind of relationship he had been missing, and he made the decision to leave Emma for someone who embodied the fantasy he had always sought. 11. Communication breakdown. Communication is often the backbone of any successful relationship. Without clear, honest, and consistent communication, misunderstandings and emotions like frustration and resentment can accumulate. A husband may grow weary of trying to communicate his needs or concerns, especially if his wife seems indifferent or unresponsive. This often leads to isolation within the marriage and a search for someone who is willing to listen and connect. Example performed. James and Clara's marriage began with a lot of promise, but over time they both became entrenched in their individual routines. James started noticing that whenever he tried to talk about his feelings or any issues at work, Clara would either brush him off or criticize him for overreacting. Everyone says that marriage is all about isolation, but it has the opposite effect on me. She seemed too preoccupied with managing the home and taking care of their 2 young children. Eventually, James stopped sharing his frustrations altogether and turned inward. As time passed, he began feeling disconnected and lonely in his marriage. At work, he started spending more time with Vanessa, a colleague who always took the time to listen, support him, and offered thoughtful advice. When Vanessa would ask how he was doing or listen to his struggles, it felt like a form of validation James hadn't experienced in years. Her kindness slowly turned into emotional attachment, and eventually, he decided to leave Clara for someone who provided the communication and understanding he was no longer receiving at home. 12. Seeking ego boosts. A husband may leave his wife if he feels his ego is not being stroked or appreciated in the relationship. Over time, some men start to feel unrecognized for their accomplishments and efforts, especially if their partner fails to validate or admire them. The search for external validation from someone who makes them feel desirable or valuable can fuel the decision to leave. Example: Brian was proud of the work he did as a marketing manager. However, his wife, Grace, often failed to acknowledge his successes, choosing instead to focus on other concerns like home renovations or parenting tasks. Although she appreciated his work in her own way, she rarely praised him outright. Over time, Brian started to feel that his professional contributions and successes were taken for granted. At a networking event, Brian struck up a conversation with Lisa, a woman who seemed genuinely interested in his career. She showered him with compliments about his recent accomplishments and made him feel like he was truly special. Brian found himself invigorated by the attention and began spending more time with Lisa, and filled a void he felt had been growing in his marriage. At night, Lisa came home and told Brian that her family had been separated by combat and it was time to find a new home. Her admiration lifted his self-esteem and filled a void by his marriage. Eventually, the praise Brian received from Lisa was too much for him to ignore, and he left Grace for someone who made him feel seen and valued again. Key takeaways from the points: a midlife crisis can lead husbands to question their life choices and seek adventure, but it doesn't justify leaving a stable marriage without addressing internal struggles first. Unrealistic expectations often arise from societal or personal fantasies, which can ultimately damage marriages when these ideals are prioritized over the reality of partnership. Finally, communication breakdown can be toxic in a marriage, causing partners to retreat emotionally and seek intimacy or understanding elsewhere. Some men may leave their wives because they are seeking an ego boost, the need for affirmation that has not been met in their existing relationship. We explored how external influences, unmet emotional needs, and inner turmoil can contribute to a husband choosing to leave. Understanding these emotional triggers provides insight into why someone might act against their best interests. 13. Infidelity on both sides. Sometimes husbands leave because of infidelity, whether it's their own or their wives'. In many cases, infidelity is the ultimate manifestation of an already deteriorating relationship. However, if both partners have failed to meet each other's emotional and physical needs for a long time, betrayal can occur from either side. When trust has been broken, it can lead to a breakdown in communication, making the marriage feel unrepairable. Even if one spouse is the first to cheat, the emotional consequences may make the other partner seek solace in another relationship as well. Example, Ethan and Amanda were married for nearly 15 years. Ethan worked long hours in a demanding job, while Amanda stayed home to care for their children. Both partners, while caring and well-meaning, grew further apart as the years went by. Amanda, feeling neglected and unappreciated, began an affair with a man she met at a fitness class. Meanwhile, Ethan, despite his hours at work, started noticing that his connection with Amanda had become strained and emotionally distant. In a moment of weakness, Ethan sought comfort with a colleague, Anne, who had been incredibly supportive of him through a recent personal crisis. One conversation turned into many, and one night they crossed a boundary and shared an intimate moment. The guilt they both felt afterwards was immense. Amanda discovered the affair and confronted Ethan. Deeply hurt by the betrayal and unable to trust him anymore, Ethan decided to leave Amanda, feeling that starting anew with Anne offered him a cleaner break from the toxic cycle of betrayal. End 14. Emotional immaturity refers to the inability to cope with emotional challenges in a healthy way. In some cases, husbands may leave their wives because they feel unable or unwilling to face the realities and complexities of marriage. This can manifest as avoiding difficult conversations, acting impulsively, or having a childlike desire to escape the emotional responsibilities of a long-term relationship. The new partner may provide them with a sense of simplicity and escape from their inner turmoil. Example, Kyle had always been the fun guy in his relationship with Mia. Carefree, spontaneous, and eager to avoid confrontation. As their marriage progressed, issues that Kyle had ignored began piling up. They had financial troubles, raised children together, and faced external stresses, but Kyle never matured in how he handled these difficulties. Whenever Mia tried to talk to him about their future, their problems, or anything serious, Kyle would either shut down or deflect with jokes. Over time, Mia's disappointment grew, and she became distant. When Kyle met Jessica, a younger woman at his gym, he was drawn to her light-hearted attitude and the easygoing nature of their interactions. They would spend time joking, going on spontaneous dates, and talking about nothing serious. In Jessica, Kyle saw an emotional simplicity he believed he had lost with Mia. Rather than confronting the complicated emotional reality of his marriage, Kyle left Mia, mistakenly believing his new relationship would offer him more freedom and happiness without the burdens of adulthood. 15. Growing apart over time. One of the most painful reasons why marriages end is simply that the individuals in the relationship evolve in ways that make them no longer compatible. People grow, change, and adapt over time, and this can sometimes lead to a loss of the deep connection that once tied them together. Over the years, a couple may find that they no longer share common interests, goals, or a way of life, leading to one or both partners seeking fulfillment elsewhere. Example. Rebecca and Alex had been married for over 18 years, and during that time their lives were centered around raising children and building careers. In their early years together they shared hobbies, friends, and a vibrant sense of adventure. However, once their kids left home, things began to shift. Rebecca started focusing on personal growth, taking up new hobbies like art classes, and starting to travel alone. Alex, on the other hand, remained fixated on his job and his interests, including his weekend football games and fishing trips. Their once in-session conversations became stilted and strained. Whenever they spent time together, there was an undeniable sense of disconnect. When Alex met Natalie through a mutual friend at a vacation resort, they quickly realized they had much more in common. Natalie loved the things that Rebecca used to enjoy, and she was eager to travel, try new activities, and talk about things that excited Alex. He found himself reawakening to feelings and desires he thought were buried. Ultimately, Alex made the painful decision to leave Rebecca, feeling that he was no longer compatible with the woman he had built a life with. Key takeaways from this segment. Infidelity, whether initiated by one or both partners, can devastate a marriage and push one spouse to leave for another person. The emotional weight of betrayal, coupled with the destruction of trust, often becomes too much to bear. Emotional immaturity can sabotage a relationship, particularly if one partner fails to address challenges in a mature way. A lack of emotional resilience can lead to detachment and the belief that leaving will provide a simpler, more carefree life. Growing apart over time is a painful but real process that can happen when individuals evolve into different versions of themselves. Interested in joy? Click the link to our Squadron Productions. Interests, goals, and values shift, sometimes causing irreparable emotional and psychological distances. These reasons highlight the complexity of marital relationships and the personal struggles that many individuals face within their unions. Understanding these dynamics is key to fostering healthy communication, connection, and mutual growth within a marriage. Footnote: understanding why husbands leave their wives' marriage is a dynamic relationship that evolves over time. Each partnership is unique, shaped by individual personalities, life experiences, and shifting circumstances. While many marriages thrive through deep commitment and mutual effort, others face challenges that may feel insurmountable, leading one or both partners to question the foundation of their relationship. In this exploration, we've examined 20 reasons why husbands may leave their wives, including emotional, psychological, and practical factors that shape their decisions. Ultimately, the decision to leave a spouse is seldom about a single moment or reason. It often arises from a complex web of unmet needs, personal desires, and emotional dissatisfaction. Whether it's a search for freedom from responsibilities, the allure of novelty and excitement, or the unspoken frustrations of unmet emotional needs, the underlying themes revolve around feelings of disconnection, unfulfillment, or the need for a change. Ecstasy provides its model for change. Key themes and insights of this video are: rather than facing these difficulties in the marriage, some men may look to other relationships as an escape, the desire for something different. Sometimes, a husband feels that over time, they've changed, or that the relationship has become predictable or burdensome. The desire for something new, whether that's emotional validation, physical attraction, or simply a different type of person, can cloud the judgment and push someone toward a significant life change. Eternal influences, societal expectations, pressures of life, responsibilities, and even the influence of peers or media may shape unrealistic ideas of love and happiness. These perceptions can make a husband feel disconnected from his spouse, leaving him to seek a relationship that fulfills fantasies or perceived emotional needs. While each story is different, these insights collectively highlight the importance of nurturing relationships and being attuned to the evolving needs of both partners. Communication, empathy, and the willingness to understand one another are foundational to a healthy marriage. When problems arise, working together to address them, rather than letting emotional distance grow, can often salvage a relationship. Here, when personal growth or external issues strain the bond between a couple, understanding the root of these struggles can provide clarity. However, when a husband leaves, it doesn't always mean the end of an individual's personal growth. Relationships can end for various reasons, but they can also pave the way for learning and self-discovery. The journey that follows an exit from a marriage can offer lessons about one's emotional needs, the importance of self-awareness, and the paths to creating healthier relationships in the future. Finally, marriage requires continuous effort, empathy, and growth. No one is perfect, but understanding the factors that lead to conflict or disconnection can better equip us to create partnerships where both people can thrive, both individually and together. Whether your marriage faces challenges or you're simply seeking to deepen your connection, the key to overcoming obstacles lies in open, honest dialogue, mutual respect, and shared understanding of the needs that drive both partners. While marriages can end, the hope lies in recognizing and addressing the emotional, personal, and relational struggles that may arise, ultimately fostering growth, healing, and a more profound connection with oneself and one's partner.